Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Mark from Solar Games. Today, let's talk about a theoretical possibility of the future of draft boosters. In fact, it's been something that's on my mind for about 2 years now, since the introduction of set boosters. I've been kind of thinking slowly about what is Wizards' plan for the future. For those of you who have been playing Magic for the last 2 years, you probably understand that there's draft, set, and collector's boosters. Well, for all of us that were playing before 2 years ago, we just knew one word. It's called booster box. So, for example, if you were talking about Brothers War, in the past, it would have just been Brothers War booster box. That's it. And there would be a booster pack. There was only one product. It was the draft booster experience. Of course, with the introduction of set boosters and collector's booster, they have to also add a name to the draft booster box. So that's how draft booster box even became a name. I think about a year ago, there was a topic that kind of flew around on Mark Rosewater's blog, which basically was him floating around this idea of what if, and he does this a lot, by the way, because he's always R&Ding for the future. And back then, I actually thought this was coming down the line. But he basically asked, what if Wizards no longer offered, or specifically, what if Wizards offered a draft-only experience from the draft booster? Essentially, one of the problems that a lot of players have, and we have a word for it, it's called draft chaff, right? So there are cards that are useful, powerful, and limited that would never ever see any constructive play. And this includes some uncommons, definitely a lot of commons, but also some rares. And nowadays, even some mythics, right? And so one of the questions that always comes up is, it's kind of weird to put a draft chaff in a product like set booster or collector booster, but you kind of have to put it in there because it's part of the set. And so, of course, it's needed in the draft booster. So what if Wizard makes a very specific for drafting product that is separate from the set booster, that is separate from the collector's booster? And so the idea being something like, hey, we offer you a draft experience, and it's only for drafting. Once you draft it, the cards are kind of worthless after the limited experience, right? Because again, the cards are just going to be draft chaff. It's all made of draft chaff, maybe a little bit of spice, but mostly it's going to be for drafting, and that's the focus of that box. In some ways, that is actually it's more pure this way because you're moving back to the experience and the whole idea of draft, and you're simplifying the draft experience. But I fear I think if there's a drastic cost reduction because you're basically selling a one-time experience, I think that's actually okay, maybe even agreeable, because again, it could help a lot of LGSs where they could run, for example, $5 draft events, maybe, right? The booster box can be made very, very cheap. And then you could reserve the set boosters and the collector boosters as lines of product where it's really meant to be open, mass box open by either players or stores or collectors, investors, whatever, and to really sell and bring to market the singles that's needed for the constructed play, standard, modern, pioneer, all your other formats, eternal formats as well. It's an interesting idea, right? Because if you think about it, the whole idea is that I was talking to one of my friends actually this past weekend when we were doing our Ultimate Masters draft, and I brought up this question, which is like, hey, with products like draft boosters kind of going down in price, why is that a bad idea? And of course, the response I got was something like, hey, I want to be able to play the game. I don't want to pay too much to play the game, but I also want my kind of experience to have some value at the end. So I said, why do you want your experience to have some value? Isn't the value in, the game just the draft, right? Again, I'm asking contrarian questions because I want to evoke some conversation and, thoughts on this topic. And it was a curious response I got, which is something like this. Well, I value the draft experience at, and then he gave me a monetary amount, right? And he says, well, if that's true, then I don't want to pay a box where, let's say I pay $100 and I open it, I draft, and I think that experience is worth, let's say, $50. I don't want to then walk away and feel like all I have left in cards value-wise is only like $20. So I think that's a really good point, and I think that's actually a really interesting perspective. So I wonder, right? So I offered him two options. I said, well, what if this happens, right? Let's say you say the draft experience for you is worth $50. What if Wizard just offers you a product where It's full of draft chaff. All the cards are not going to be worth it, but the draft experience should be pretty fun, right? And it's going to cost you $50 only. Now, you're expected to buy the thing for 50, you open it, you draft it, you have fun, and it's expected to go to zero. Maybe it has a little bit of monetary value, but it's expected to be at zero. Would you be happy with that? And it's interesting because, for me personally, I would say if you truly value the draft experience at 50, then you should be totally happy or at least totally fine with this other alternative, right? And he brought to me, said, not really. And one of the reasons he kind of said not really is because I think there is this weird loss aversion that happens with people, right? I think everybody kind of wants to have this feeling of you spend $100, you open it, you play with your friends, which you again value at $50, but then what's left over in the box is still worth $70. So you're actually up $120. See, people are more afraid of losing something than gaining something, right? So they don't want to feel like they open it and they lost the value of the whole box. They would rather gain something from it. And this is really interesting, right? So they would rather pay more, pay $100 and feel like they gain at the end $20 than to say I paid 50 and I lost all 50, even though the math of that is pretty much the same. So it's really weird, this perspective that I hear from other people. But one of the challenges I think, so personally, where do I stand with this? I think this whole draft only booster experience probably will never fly for the one reason of this. The whole idea here is like this. If you take out some of the cards that you feel are constructed only, right? You're now actually taking away game pieces that you've already designed for the set, right? You're essentially saying, oh, don't draft with these cards, but instead, they're going to be used for standard or constructed play. So you're kind of taking that piece out, but you already designed the cards. So isn't it weird to kind of take that out of the set? Number two, how many of these cards are you going to have to take out? Because if you neuter a set, let's say a set normally nowadays have 280 cards, of which probably 20 to 30 are mythic rares and about 80 or so are rares. Are you going to tell me that you're going to take out about 15 to 20 mythic rares and maybe 30, 40 rares? Because those are the constructed play ones and the rest are your draft chaff kind of cards. So that gets really weird because now I feel like drafting this set is actually half the experience. Maybe I'd rather go and buy set boosters, buy some draft boosters, and do some sort of combination and build my own draft, basically a cube, if you will, right, of the current set to really have a full draft experience. So I think it's kind of weird because if you do that and all the audience starts basically making their own cube of your format, you're losing. Actually, you potentially could be losing a lot of revenue because, again, players are basically choosing not to buy your product. So I think it's actually pretty high risk to go do this. The other problem, too, is, look, no format is solved. So one of the issues is you can say this box is draft chaff, but what might end up happening is that one card you thought was definitely a draft chaff, well, guess what? It's going to be very viable in constructed play. Now everybody wants it, and now you have a weird inverted EV. The problem, it's not a bad thing that a $50 box is now worth, for example, $80 because you can open it, play the draft, but also earn money from it. What that's probably going to do for the set booster where this card is not available is that box you're kind of trying to sell for $110 may now have to go back down to 80, 70, 60, 50. So it's a weird balance. And so not having all the cards of the set in each one of the boxes to be possibly opened up, you are actually putting yourself at a higher risk of potentially one line of product not selling, right? Because again, there's an imbalance between the products and maybe one of the products is deemed better by the players and now the other products aren't going to sell. Especially if it's one of your lower product that is deemed better than the higher level product. Now you're going to lose a lot of top line revenue because look, it's like who's going to buy your collector's booster if it doesn't contain that one card that everyone's going to need for a constructed play. So it's high risk, but I think this whole idea of potentially having a draft only experience probably won't fly. However, this might be the actual future. One thing that you always think about is why do draft boosters come in 36 packs? I think a lot of my friends didn't know the answer to this, but the reason is actually because the other 12 that's extra after your pot of 8 people drafting 3 each, 24 packs, there's 12 packs left. Those are actually meant for prize support, when you play internally with your friends or whatever. Of course, you don't really need prize support, and many other games actually go with 24 pack booster boxes. It's a very common thing. The benefit of potentially shifting a draft booster from 36 to 24 is that you're actually going to be able to free up a bunch of space in the actual packaging when you ship them too. So not just are you able to make a draft experience slightly cheaper to sell to players, you potentially could also, make it cheaper and logistically to go ship to stores, package, box, whatever size, those kind of things. So there's actually kind of an interesting benefit to potentially changing the size of the draft booster. That's number one possibility. The other thing is, while I say that I don't think long-term the whole separation of a draft and a set where they literally don't have the same cards is a benefit to the game or it will work, you're already seeing some of this today, right? So I think this started around, I want to say, Dominaria definitely had this already, but maybe even a couple sets ago, you had these exclusive cards, right, that were part of the set, but they're not part of the draft booster, right? So that's really interesting because, as an example here, you can tell. Yeah, there were for Brothers War, there were a couple cards. I think it was one in white, one in blue, and one in red, I think, and a couple artifacts that were exclusively for constructed play. So they showed up in set boosters, they showed up in collector's booster, and they showed up in a lot of the jumpstart boosters, right? And the whole idea is being that, hey, these cards are meant for constructed play. They're not meant for, draft play. But what happened? Well, the issue is, part of those are already, separated. And I don't really know if on the secondary market, people are valuing these cards that are exclusively for constructed play higher or not. But you can already see, even if this idea of having separate boxes won't work long term, Wizard is and has been already testing this idea behind the scenes with us. That's why they're doing this way. And in some ways, they're even with the Jumpstart product testing a box that's meant for example, constructed play. You do a one-time Jumpstart play, then all the cards now become available for constructed. Would that box with a high level of those cards that are not printed in draft boosters and rarely printed in set boosters, by the way, would a Jumpstart product having those exclusive cards actually work? And the data is telling them no, because again, the Jumpstart is a bad product. But what if they make the Jumpstart product actually pretty good, right? Similar to Jumpstart 2022, lots of deck variety, but with those exclusive cards. I don't know. Maybe that is a way to potentially have a fourth line for a product, that we haven't thought about. Again, not looking forward to that. I think we're going to have way too many products as of today, but that is a possibility. So, okay, I'm just going to cut it off there. That's my thoughts on the whole future of draft boosters. I think it's kind of interesting to think about, so we'll see. All right, see you later. Bye.